Hey guys, so today I'm going to be reading the first two chapters of the American Revolutionary War by George Joshua. Let's see what those two, here it is, the table of contents. So I'm going to be reading what caused the American Revolutionary War now, and then right after that I'm going to do the path to war. And then in our next episode, I'm going to do the battles of Lexington and Concord and battles of Fort Tigreganda. Okay, so let's begin. What caused the American Revolutionary War? There was no one cause of the American War of Independence. The fight was between the 13 original American colonies and Britain. The colonies were extremely unhappy with the way that Britain was treating them and thought that the taxes they had to pay were too high. There were other grievances as well, and feelings were running high as to what was the best way to resolve the problems. In the end, the colonists decided that the only solution was to fight for their freedom and throw the British troops out of their country. Not all of the colonists agreed with this solution and didn't want to break free from Britain. Many of these people fled back to the mother country when the war was over and the British defeated. The War of Independence is one of the most iconic moments in history and created what would eventually be the most powerful nation on the planet. Because of the war's importance, it is often oversimplified, and some truths that are not so comfortable are brushed over. The war pitted American against American as loyalists to the king resisted of the changes. A lot of colonists fought on the side of the British, and at least 10,000 fled in despair when the war was lost and their country became independent. Without the help of the French, who hated the British, it is debatable whether the colonists could have won. At the very least, the war would have more than likely lasted longer. Okay, Chapter 2, The Path to War. Here's a caption for the picture below. It is the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, let's continue. The war didn't occur overnight. There were several years of anger against what colonists saw as unjust laws passed by the British Parliament. Here are some paragraphs. Let's start with American mentality. The founding of the colonies happened because people were fleeing Europe to escape persecution. Colonists were afraid that this freedom would be lost if Britain gained further control. Now we're on to the French and Indian War. This war started in 1754 and finished in 1763. It was fought between the American colonists and New France, or the French colonists. The Native American tribes allied themselves with either one side or the other. British troops helped the American colonists in the war. After the war had finished, British troops stayed in America to protect the colonies. It came, however, at a price. Britain taxed the Americans for the protection, as keeping troops in the colonies was expensive. Okay, now we're on to the last paragraph. Laws and taxes. The situation in the 13 colonies before 1764 was very free. The colonists mainly governed themselves without British interference. After the end of the war in 1764, new laws were passed, which the colonists hated. Many demanded representation in the British Parliament, and the rallying call was no tax without representation. Okay, here's the Boston paragraph. Here it is. Boston. The Sons of Liberty was a group of American patriots formed in the city of Boston just after the war in 1765. It quickly spread throughout the country. The formation of the group meant it was possible to organize protests against the unjust laws and taxes. The Boston Massacre took place during one of these protests, and some colonies were killed by British troops. Boston, at the time, was a hotbed of protest against Britain. In response, Britain didn't take back down, but imposed a new tax on tea. This led to the Boston Tea Party. In this protest, patriots disguised as Native Americans boarded some British ships in Boston Harbor and threw chests of tea into the water. And at the time, tea was very expensive, so the British were really upset. So yeah. Okay, now the last paragraph. The intolerable acts. Rather than trying to understand and negotiate a settlement, the British punished the colonists for their actions in Boston and passed some new laws that were nicknamed the Intolerable Acts. The British shut down Boston Harbor with all the passing of the Boston Port Act. This punished all Bostonians, and the people of the city were furious. This fury spread because everybody was afraid that the same thing would happen to them. Okay, second paragraph. United against a common enemy. Punishing the colonies had the opposite effect of what the British wanted. The British Parliament thought that it could subdue the colonists by passing harsh laws. In fact, it united the country against them. Even though there were still many colonists loyal to Britain, many began to want independence. These people rallied around Boston and sent supplies to get around the British blockade. The First Continental Congress. 12 of the 13 colonies attended the First Continental Congress in 1774. This was in direct response to the Intolerable Acts and was not to gain independence. They wrote and then dispatched a petition to the British King, King George, and asked him to repeal the acts. The king never replied. Now another paragraph. War. The war officially started in 1775 when the two sides engaged at the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So that was the first two chapters of the American Revolutionary War by George Joshua. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in my next video about the American Revolutionary War, Battles of Lexington and Concord. Bye!